So welcome to those of you joining tonight for Maximising Your Training as a Woman, and those of you who are joining, watching the recording as well, welcome as well. So we're going to kick off. Just to quickly go through a few housekeepings. First of all, as you'll have just heard, the nice Zoom lady say, this has been recorded. If any of you want to share your screen at any point, not share your screen, share your camera view at any point, this you won't appear on the recording. So I'll be able to see you. Everybody else here tonight will be able to see you, but you won't be here on the recording. So if you want to share your screen, I'd love to be able to see some of you. It's always so much easier talking to people, but please don't feel obliged to. I know it's evening. You've probably got a million things going on and eating and everything. So absolutely fine to have the cameras off if you want. If you keep your sound off, just so the sound quality is good, but please do be ready to use the chat box. I've been trying to encourage people to get going on the chat box already. It's just so much easier to have a bit of interaction and know how things are landing with you. So feel free to use that chat box. If you've got questions to ask as we go, then please do just pop them in. I'll either answer them as we go, or when we get to a kind of a logical place to answer them. And please, can we just treat anything that is shared tonight as confidential between those of us who are either here tonight or watching the recording. So let's kick off. So we're going to be kicking off just with a few quick this is the agenda, kicking off with a few quick intros. It has been a long week already. Then we will be looking at my 3 recommended steps to build your training as a woman. So getting to know yourself and your cycle, looking after your muscles and bones, and nutrition. There's obviously loads more that I could say in terms of building your training as a woman. And that's stuff that we can talk about in the future if you're interested. And there's a Q&A at the end as well. But these are kind of 3 main things that I've picked out as the sort of fundamental pillars for building your training up as a woman. I will then be talking you through a little bit more in case you are interested in finding out more about working with me going forwards. If that's okay with you, then I'll just spend some time talking you through that. I'll issue you a quick challenge, nothing too daunting, don't worry, and then we should have time for a Q&A at the end. So as I say, either pop in your questions as we're going, or there'll be time at the end as well. So quick introduction to me. This is me back in 2012. Doing my very first triathlon. I was not the sporty kid at school by any means whatsoever. I had had a shocking year, really lots of things going horribly bad in my life, and my mental health was completely down in the pits. And I don't remember why. Somebody asked me recently why, and I don't remember why, but for some reason I sort of thought, okay, I've got to do something to change something. And so I started doing a fundraising challenge to raise money for a charity I was working with at the time, but they were all different physical challenges, nothing enormous, but things that were a big deal for me. And within that, one of them was to do my first triathlon. And I don't think it's any exaggeration to say that that triathlon changed my life. Doing that triathlon and the process of doing it and the process of realizing what an impact exercise and everything that goes with it could have on your mental health changed my life to the extent that I then changed my career to become, first of all, a personal trainer and then a triathlon coach, because I wanted to help other people, particularly women, to experience the impact that exercise can have and the difference that it can make in your life. So as I say, I trained as a personal trainer. I worked in some of Virgin Active's top London clubs, supporting people with personal training, but particularly supporting people towards endurance training goals like marathons and triathlons. I then trained as a triathlon coach, level 2 and then level 3 with British Triathlon. And I now work one-to-one with my clients, supporting them in their training plans and coaching to go alongside that. Probably another sort of big turning moment in my life was becoming or training as a mental health and exercise coach. I, as I said, had always been so impressed by the importance of exercise for mental health and could really see the benefit that that could bring. And I wanted to be able to support my clients to get the benefits, the mental health benefits of exercise. But I could also see how much we often use exercise as a stick to beat ourselves up with. We're not good enough. We're not fast enough. We're not thin enough. We're not this enough. We're not that enough. And we can often end up actually putting more pressure and doing ourselves more harm in terms of our mental health, in terms of our relationship with exercise. So I wanted to have the tools to be able to support my clients to change that and make it a more positive relationship. And inspired on from that, I then trained as a life coach just to carry on building those tools to be able to support my clients. In terms of my own training, I've done lots of GB races as an age grouper, racing for Team GB. I've done more Ironman races than I would really like to think about. I've done more Audaxes and long distance cycle races, again, than I would like to think about or is probably healthy. I, as I said, work for Virgin Active. I was their endurance lead in their London clubs. I work with Run Mummy Run. I am one of their community run club experts. And I work with Fun to Try UK, brilliant organisation trying to increase the number of females racing triathlon in this country. So I love working with them as well. I have been head coach with, I think, 4 different triathlon clubs now. I'm currently with York Triathlon Club. I'm based up in York, and I'm very passionate about supporting people to work with the club scene. I think, you know, again, it's that exercise, but it's also the community that it brings that can be so important for our mental health and for our general health as well. In terms of working with my clients, I have a membership that I'll be telling you a bit more about tonight. I have a weekly strength and conditioning class, Club Feel Fit, along with mobility sessions, weekly mobility sessions. And then I work one-to-one with clients, writing their training plans and supporting them with coaching to reach their goals. So over to you guys, get ready with that chat box again. What's your main goal for this year? That doesn't have to be a race. It could be that you want to work with your body better. It could be that you are trying to increase your strength and conditioning. Whatever it is, have you got a goal? Doesn't have to be amazing, doesn't have to be all like wow, wow, wow. Just what's the main thing that you're focusing on this year so I can get to know you guys a bit. I thought that was you, Roxanne. I presumed you were that Roxanne. I got confused because there was another Roxanne in at lunch. So Roxanne is doing a lot of half marathons this year, and I presume coming up for another one soon. I will wait to hear all about that. What about the rest of you? Oh wow, I thought it might be soon. Good luck with the packing. While you guys type in what you are up to, just to let you know, of the people that signed up for this week of talks that I'm doing for International Women's Day this week, these are the things that people raised as their biggest issue in terms of relating to their training as a woman. So one of the big ones was their menstrual cycle, working around their menstrual cycle with their training, and that's one of the things I'll definitely be talking about today. Weight and body image came up. I'll be touching on that a little bit today. Nutrition came up, and I'll definitely be talking about that a lot today. Injuries, we'll be giving some advice on that. Juggling time and priorities isn't part of the main agenda, but I've got it marked down as something we can talk about in the Q&A if that's useful for you guys. Issues around not feeling comfortable in training spaces, whether that's that they're kind of male-dominated spaces, fear around safety, running in the dark. Not talking about that so much tonight, but again, we can talk about it in the Q&A if you want. Menopause, I won't be talking about much at all tonight because I've got another session on that tomorrow. I'll give you the details in 2 secs. Strength training, we'll definitely be talking about. And energy and sleep and energy related to the menstrual cycle, I'll definitely be talking about tonight. In terms of what we'll be touching on tonight, we're only, as I say, be touching on things. There's so much more that we could go into, and these are all things that I talk a lot more in my membership. So if you're interested in my membership, these are all things that we definitely cover in a lot more detail there. So just coming back to your goals, Tara says no specific goals, just becoming generally fitter and stronger. And Tara is definitely becoming fitter and stronger because I do strength and conditioning with her and I can see that she is getting fitter and stronger. Ella wants to be more consistent with running and cycling, view to turning to triathlons, already does open water swim. So you've cracked that one that often trips up a lot of us. Needs to get her head around showing up, being a goal, and that it doesn't have to be a sufferfest every time. We will be talking about that today, Ella. And Emma wants to get stronger, fitter, and able to run longer distances. She's also looking at weight loss, and she recognises that nutrition is a challenge. So again, we'll be talking about lots of those things today. Oh, I've just got rid of the chat box by accident. Let me just get that back up. Okay, so in terms of perimenopause, if that is something that impacts on any of you, then I've got another talk tomorrow, midday, tomorrow, Thursday, the 6th of March, where I'll be talking a lot more about perimenopause. So I'm not covering that much today. Any of you who are registered for today's talk should have the details of that talk for tomorrow. Okay, so why am I doing a specific session? Yes, that will be recorded as well, Roxanne, and you'll get the recording through if you've signed up, which clearly you have because you're here now. So why a specific session on women? Hormones impact our lives, impact our bodies, and impact our training. 1 in 3 of us have missed work due to our menstrual cycle. 30% of us say that our menstrual cycle significantly affects our quality of life. 88% of us say that our menstrual cycle symptoms limit our exercise performance. So we can see from that, just a few quick stats there, that hormones have a massive impact on us and pretty much everything we do, and particularly in terms of training. Yet most of the exercise guidelines that we have are based on men. If you go to a typical training session at a club, most of what we're told is based on men. If we read a magazine, if we read a newspaper, if we just hear people talking in, everyday life, the general advice that we understand is based on men. And a lot of that is great. A lot of that is absolutely fine and appropriate. But there is some things where it makes a difference that if we're a female. Up until the mid 90s in the US and in Europe, we were not allowed to test any medical research, was not allowed to be done on women of childbearing potential. So there's a massive gap in terms of the amount of knowledge we have about women. And that was medical research. Exercise and nutrition is a relatively new field and has only come in probably seriously in the last 10 years or so. But there's still that hangover that we didn't test on females before, and we're only starting to test on them now. One of the reasons for that is that it's a lot harder to do research on women. If you do research on women, you have to control for their menstrual cycle. So you have to make sure that you know what part of their menstrual cycle they're in, and have the right number of people in each part of that menstrual cycle, the phase of the menstrual cycle as you do the research. That admittedly makes it a lot harder to do the research. But if the reason we're giving not to do research is that the menstrual cycle has too much of an effect on the outcome, surely we as women deserve to know that impact, that effect on the outcome. And so we need to be doing that research. Yet only 6% of research is done solely on females. And any research that is looking into the impact of the menstrual cycle would be solely on females. So there is a real limited amount of research that has been done on women so that we can better understand how exercise impacts us, or how our menstrual cycle impacts on our exercise, how it impacts on our nutrition. And it's a growing field. This has definitely changed. And to be fair, that stat of 6% is from last year. I'm pretty sure it's probably changed by this year. And the quality of that research is getting better, as well as we understand more and more about how to do research on women and work with menstrual cycles. But there's still a real lack of knowledge out there. And for me, knowledge is power. Knowledge gives you that awareness. If you have the awareness of the issues that affect you, you know the words, you use the words with confidence, you understand the questions to ask, you can advocate for yourself with confidence, whether that's in a club session, whether that's going to the GP, whether that's just looking out for your own interests. And the longer that we don't talk about the differences, not to overemphasize the differences between men and women, but to understand those differences, and the more that we're scared to talk about things like periods, like menopause, the more that we have that taboo, that's denying us this power. And again, that's changing. I started doing these talks, I think about 5 years ago, and it genuinely felt kind of controversial to say the word menopause or even periods then. And it definitely doesn't feel like that now. So that taboo is changing, but it's still there. And because I strongly believe that if we understand our body and know how to work with our body, we can get more from it. So we get better results, but we also enjoy the process better because we're not fighting ourselves constantly. And so that's one of the things that I'll be talking about today, how we can learn to work better with our body. So that leads us on to the first point, how to get to know yourself and work with your body. So first of all, for those of us who have a menstrual cycle, it can often be like, oh God, I've got my period. That's such a pain. I hate having my period. But we have to remember that our periods are a sign that our body is healthy. They're a sign that everything is regulated, not everything, but, and that most things are regulated, and that our body is healthy enough to ultimately to conceive a baby. Now, we might not want to conceive a baby, but it shows that our body trusts that everything is ticking along well enough that we are healthy enough to be able to do that. And it's also really important that we're having that menstrual cycle, because associated with the menstrual cycle are the sex hormones that are released, which are absolutely essential for our bone health, muscle growth, a load of other processes as well, but particularly in the context of training, our bone health and our muscle growth. It is not okay to lose your period. It used to be seen almost as a badge of honor, or just the kind of, the normal thing that if you were training harder, you would lose your period. And that is a sign that our body is out of balance, that we're in low energy availability, being a technical term, potentially leading to reduced energy deficiency, relative energy deficiency and sports syndrome. Put the S on there, the extra S if you want, but REDS is what it's known as. That is a really serious condition, and it can take a long time to reverse. So if you are suspecting that you're losing your menstrual cycle through training, through the energy balance between training and what you're consuming not being enough, please speak to your coach if you have one, speak to your GP, and make sure you're taking additional measures to protect your bones, because when we don't have our menstrual cycle, we haven't got that estrogen. Estrogen is highly protective of our bones, so we need to make sure we're looking after our bones. In terms of what normal is, in terms of a normal cycle can last anywhere from 21 to 32 days. As we get through to perimenopause, that changes. It can be 3 months or whatever between cycles. But if we're premenopausal, we're looking at about 21 to 32 days. Your start of your period is day 1, and then you split that cycle into 2 halves with ovulation in the middle. If you want to know if you're ovulating, often it's accompanied by a release of a sort of egg whitey discharge. So that's a good way of knowing where you are in that cycle in the middle. If you have particularly bad symptoms, and it's hard to know what's normal because you've lived with your body all the time, but it might change, or it might be when you talk to your friends, you realise that you have symptoms which are much worse than other people. Please see your GP and don't just accept it. Things like endometriosis, I think the average time to get diagnosed with endometriosis is 9 years. And it's a very hard thing to diagnose, but I think it's also because it's just not recognised enough by the medical profession, and women probably don't push hard enough saying this is not normal, this is not right. There's so much research showing that we expect women, they can't take pain, and so they're just complaining, particularly women of colour, even bigger issue. So we need to sometimes fight hard and say this isn't normal and I need some more support than what I'm getting. Oh, sorry, just clicked the wrong button. So in terms of that menstrual cycle, my strong recommendation, and this is if you're perimenopausal as well, is to spend some time getting to know yourself. Track your full cycle and get to know the patterns in it. And you might say at first there are no patterns, but generally, not always, but generally, when we start looking, we start to spot those patterns. So even if you have a completely irregular cycle, you might start to realize what the warning signs are, or the sort of forebearers of what's to come. I get sore boobs, then I get this, then I get that, and then if I bleed, I get the bleeding. Maybe you never bleed because you're on contraception or because you're perimenopausal, but you can still feel that's a cycle. Get to know your baseline. Get to know what is normal for you. And that's so important, because if you don't know what's normal, it's really hard to know when you have any changes. And often things, medical conditions, perimenopause, these things kind of creep up on us slowly, sometimes like a ton of bricks, but sometimes slowly. And if you don't know what normal was, it's really hard to remember, is this how things always felt, or is this a change? So know that baseline so you can see how things are changing, particularly if you then want to go to a GP, you've got some evidence of what things were like before to show how they've changed. But then secondly, once you start to know how your body works and when you feel good and when you feel bad and when this happens and when that happens, it means you can start to work with your body much more effectively. This isn't about giving you more homework, another thing to worry about. This is what the author Maisie Hill says. She kind of likens it to having a weather forecast. Having a weather forecast doesn't mean that you don't go out the house. It just means you've got the umbrella. It means you're prepared if you need to be. And in the same way, understanding how your body works, knowing your good days, your bad days, means that you've just got that umbrella if you need it. You know what different measures you need to take on which day. If you're perimenopausal, same thing again. Get to know yourself. And you probably need to get to know yourself all over again, because it's a whole different body to get to know. So you want to keep tracking those symptoms, even if there's no bleed. And this is whether you're pre or perimenopausal. Even if there's no bleed, you want to be tracking your symptoms, know your baseline, spotting those patterns so you can work with your body. And particularly in the context of perimenopause, being able to go to the doctor and say, look, this is how I was before, this is how I am now, it's different. And a lot of times we have to work quite hard to get the doctor to listen to us. There is no test for perimenopause unless you're particularly young. If you're of a normal perimenopausal age, there's no test. It's just you describing your symptoms. So have that evidence to show them. In terms of what to track, as I say, we're not just talking about, when do you bleed, how much do you bleed, but things like the perceived effort when you're doing sessions, whether your fueling preferences or needs change, whether your recovery needs change throughout that cycle. You might want to or look at your resting heart rate and see if that changes, particularly if you use resting heart rate to judge what intensity of a session to do. You need to know if that changes throughout your cycle. Get to know your heart rate for key sessions and if that changes through the cycle. When I say heart rate, that's using a chest strap. I wouldn't worry. If you're using your watch, then I wouldn't trust the heart rate on that anyway, particularly for running. If you measure HRV, does that change throughout your cycle? And then do things like aches and injuries and inflammation, mood, energy, focus, balance, body heat. These are all things that can change throughout our cycle. And again, getting to know if it's a particular issue for us means that we can work with our body, focus on the things that we need to focus on more, take different measures. as we need to. In terms of how to track, there's loads of apps out there, but I kind of come back to the old fashioned method, either a notebook or a note on your phone or on your computer, so that you can just track things as they happen. A lot of the apps, it's quite hard to look back and see those patterns. Whereas when you've just got something and it's written by date, I used to have one in Excel that I color coded. Now I've just got a boring note in on my phone. But find the method that works for you, but keep it simple and make sure it is something you could output if you wanted to share it with a doctor or with a coach. Then in terms of how much we then use that information for planning our training, there was a big school of thought that says we ought to sync all of our training around our cycle. The argument being that we have more estrogen at the beginning of our cycle, and so it'd be better for weight training, and then we use fat better in the second half of our cycle, so after ovulation, so it'd be better for endurance training at that time. That makes sense. That absolutely is what happens in terms of what's going on in our body, but there's no evidence yet. If we take all the studies that have been done, there's no evidence to say that actually then proves we should adjust our training in that way. You can give it a go if that works for you, and some of the apps that you get out there sort of suggest doing that. But as I say, there's no overall evidence research that backs up that we get better training results from that. And my biggest issue with it is, even if there was evidence to say, have you got the brain space, the time to think about adjusting your training each week based on where you are on your cycle, especially if you don't always know where you are on your cycle. So I can't say keep it simple, but I absolutely do encourage my clients to work with their cycle. So in terms of key actions or things for you to write down from today's session, number one, learn what works best for you. So learn your body and know what times are best for you to do different training sessions, what time in that cycle, or even if you can't spot that cycle, what symptoms you get that say, this is a day I should do this is a day I should avoid that, like the plague. Those of you on the call now, just type into the chat now, do you take a rest week? Just put yes or no, or you're not sure if you're not sure, but do you take a rest week? So do you have a week every month or every few weeks where you either reduce your training, you reduce your intensity, you make your sessions shorter, something like that? It doesn't mean that you don't do anything. It absolutely doesn't mean that you do anything, but you take some sort of rest. I've got sometimes coming through so far. Roxanne, they're in your training plan. So, and Ella saying no, but she's so casual. And Emma, since I've been telling her to. So I would really strongly recommend having a rest week in there. If you have menstrual symptoms which impact on you, perimenopausal or premenopausal, but if you have symptoms that mean you feel like crap at certain times, don't try and layer hard training on top of that. Still go out and move. Generally, movement is best for us when we've got particularly menstrual symptoms, or, you know, if our mental health is suffering. So go out and get some movement in, but reduce your training. Shorter sessions, less intensity, maybe cut out a session a week or something. If we just train, when we train, our body breaks down. That is what training is. It's breaking down. We don't get fitter from training, we get fitter from recovery from training. So if we just keep on increasing the training, we just keep on increasing the rate of breakdown. We need that downtime, and then we build and we rebuild stronger. So even if you don't have hard training, it's still worth having that rest week, and you feel so much fresher mentally and physically to come back afterwards, rather than everything just being about this kind of grind. Get to know yourself. So that was number one, get to know what works best for you. Number two, take a rest week. Then ask yourself, do your fueling, your recovery, your hydration demands change? People often go, oh, I eat so much around my period. You do actually have higher energy demands around your period, only a few hundred calories, but the demand does go up. So, listen to your body. Often we're craving the things we actually need at that time. If you're racing this year, or any year, but if you're racing, check your race dates and see if they look like they're going to coincide with when you're at the sort of least good part of your training in terms of that menstrual cycle. And think about whether you need to prepare for having your period or the bad day when you're racing. And if so, do you know if you need to fuel differently? What can you do to moderate stress? Often stress is a really big has a big increase in our menstrual symptoms. So what can you do to moderate stress? So thinking around that in terms of your race plan. And then things to watch out for if you have any changes in your cycle, particularly a loss or significant delay of your cycle. It might be perimenopause, depending on your age, but it might be that you're slipping into that low energy availability. To be in low energy availability, you do not have to be skinny. You do not have to be losing weight. It's about timing around your exercise. So if you're doing a significant amount of exercise and you're not fueling sufficiently around it, and we'll go on and look at fueling in a second, that you could be slipping into that low energy availability with all the harmful consequences. So keep an eye out for it. It's something you really want to avoid. This is a quote from somebody who did my foundations course last year. My foundations course is a course giving you all the kind of tools, the foundations to build your training on. And she said that the module on women's health, so where we looked at adjusting our training based on where we were in our cycle, has been one of the hardest to shift, but also one of the most valuable. And as women, we don't like giving in to our period or our menstrual cycle. We don't want to say, oh, it makes me weaker. Bear in mind, I give rest weeks to my male clients as well. So I'm not saying, you have to, just because you have a menstrual cycle, you need to take a rest week. Everybody gets that rest week. I'm just saying, why not time it so it's in tune with when you feel least able to do hard sessions? So, my mantra for everybody, male, female, whatever, is keep your easy stuff easy so your hard stuff can be hard. Oh, my camera's just dropped out. Sorry. Yep, we're back. So make sure that you're, as I say, keep the easy stuff easy so the hard stuff can be hard. So take those rest weeks, work with your body. Just to quickly cover perimenopause, as I say, I'll be going into loads more detail tomorrow, but just because so many people, when I'm working with them, we're so often told that perimenopause is hot flushes and night sweats, and actually it's so much more than that. So people think that they go mad, either they're going mad because they've lost, their brain isn't working, or because their body isn't working, or generally both. So I won't read through them all, but there's loads of different symptoms and things that go alongside perimenopause. So be aware of those. If any of those things start changing, that could be and if you are of a certain, I'd say early 40s onwards, then consider that it could be perimenopause. In terms of how much these things affect people, 80% of women experience symptoms of perimenopause, 25% of them have severe symptoms. So it's likely that you will be experiencing some of this, how badly it affects you, whether you're in that 25% or not. And 80% of women didn't realise their symptoms were related to menopause. As I say, again, that's a reason I want to keep on sharing these wider symptoms so people are more aware. Okay, any questions on cycle tracking and those sort of things before we move on? So, next subject, looking after your muscles and your bones. Women lose up to 8% of their muscle mass a decade after their 30s, and then that accelerates as we go into perimenopause. Estrogen, one of our female sex hormones, is protective of our bones and our muscle. And as we go through perimenopause, that starts to decline, and so we start to lose muscle mass, we start to lose bone mass. 80% of the 4 million people in the UK with osteoporosis are women. So it massively adversely affects women, mostly because of this decline in estrogen and the impact that it has. And this has a serious impact on us. Postmenopausal women's chance of osteoporosis, I can't say that, a postmenopausal women's chance of having an osteoporosis related fracture is 50%. And of those with a hip fracture, these are scary statistics. 10% die within a month and a third die within a year. Now that sounds A, scary, but B, really far off. But bear in mind, what we do now makes a difference to that future that we're going to have. We stop building bone from about our mid-30s onwards. So we're not going to build bone, but we can do our very best to retain bone. Muscle, we absolutely can build it. It's a hell of a lot harder the older we get. So the younger you are, spend more time building that muscle so you've got it already there. Partly, as I say, so you've got more muscle to take into perimenopause, but also because building habits is hard and you don't want to wait until you've got all of that other whirlwind of things going on when you get to perimenopause to try and start building a new habit. Start building that muscle as soon as possible. In terms of the benefits of strength and conditioning for our training, there's a whole load of benefits that help us reduce our chance of injury, and injuries are not fun. So we want to reduce our chance of injury, but also if we avoid injury, we can be more consistent in our training. And that goes along with a whole other set of impacts about becoming more efficient, all of which means we have more consistency, we get faster, or our training becomes easier. So loads of benefits of strength and conditioning for our training, but also If we are women, and as we get older, and again, even if you're not old yet, and by old I'd say over 35 in terms of when we're talking about the physical body and the changes that happen, but even if we're not there yet, let's prepare for it. But as we get older, strength and conditioning, strength work really, can help us age better, age healthier, age happier, helps us with our body composition, helps us maintain muscle, helps us maintain bone, helps us with our posture. And at that point, I always end up sitting up better. Did everybody else do that as well? And helps us with our brain health. Loads of evidence to show that strength training can make a massive difference in terms of brain health. Women are massively adversely affected in terms of Alzheimer's as well. So let's do all we can to support that brain health. In terms of what to do, so Stacey Sims, who's one of the big advocates of female, or has done a lot to increase our awareness around the issues of female specific training. Her mantra is lift heavy shit. So we don't want to just be doing lightweight, not your 1 kilo dumbbells that we did in the 80s or whatever. And, things like Pilates are brilliant. I'm a massive fan of them, but it's not going to help us build that muscle. We want to be lifting heavy things. We want to be mostly working our legs and our lower back. That's partly because that's the areas we're most likely to get injured or have those brittle bones as women, hips and lower back injuries, or lower back osteoporosis in our hips and our lower back are really common areas that can have a really damaging effect on our quality of life. But also it helps us, is where we get around. We use our legs to walk around on. So let's train our legs to give us that base for our training, 100%, our running, our cycling, we use our legs, but also for life as we go through life. Hands up, and I can't see your hands, but in your head, hands up who, if they were to do strength work, is probably mostly doing arms and core. As women, we tend to focus on our arms and our core, probably because they're the areas that we want to look better at or look better in. Remember, we can't spot reduce fat. We don't choose where we reduce fat from. So yes, we can develop the muscle there, but if it's still fat there, you can't see that muscle. You just effectively push the fat further out. So if you're trying to lose fat, lose weight from your arms, your stomach, do squats, do deadlifts. Those are the exercises that will get your metabolic rate up, that will be most effective for burning those calories. And they're kick-ass exercises, and they're supporting you with that health and longevity. Don't be doing the sit-ups. Particularly don't be doing sit-ups because they're bad for our back. If you want to work your core to support your training, do things like planks, which are developing that inner core muscles, which are so important for life, for training. And do arm exercise by all means. We need strong arms as well. But I would focus the majority of your training on the legs and the lower back. So things like squats, lunges, deadlifts. We want to be doing heavy weights. So we want to be doing the kind of exercises where we can only do 6, or if we're newer to exercise, more reps, maybe 10 to 14 reps, but those kind of lower range of reps before we can't do any more, before we're going, ow, this hurts too much, as in muscle working, not because of the pain, but the muscle's working so much I can't do many more. I could do about 2. We want to have 2 reps in reserve so we have good quality, so we're not getting so fatigued our form drops. But we want to be using heavy enough weights that we can only do a few reps. Now, if we are working in the gym and we've got support to make sure we're happy with our technique, then we should be able to do that. If we're working at home, we might not have heavy enough weights at home. So you might be doing more reps at home. And certainly in the sessions I run for people who are mostly training from home, we do more reps than that, because otherwise we're not getting to overload, but we're certainly working the muscles. We're getting the muscles to develop. We're building that muscle mass. And anybody who knows me knows that I always put calf raises in all my classes. Don't forget your calves. If you are a runner, you should be aiming to do 3 sets of calf raises 3 times a week, and you should be able to do 25 to 30 single leg calf raises in each of those. You probably, if you've never tried before, you're probably not there yet, but work towards that. It's an area, particularly as we get older, we tend to get really more likely to be injured in our calves. So let's work on those calves. So ask yourself now, do you get in enough strength work? Do you get in maybe at least 1 or 2 sessions a week where you are lifting heavy shit, as Stacey Sims says? Are you working to build particular legs and your lower back? And if not, what could you do to add it in? And it doesn't have to be an hour-long session. We always make things bigger and harder in our mind than they need to be. Start with where you are now and see what you could add to go from there. So, any questions on strength? I'm presuming not, I can't see any, but do chuck them into the chat as we go if you do have questions. Otherwise, I'll move on to nutrition. So, in terms of nutrition, there is loads I could talk about here. And again, it's something I talk about a lot in the membership, a lot that I talk about with my clients. I'm just sort of bringing out some key points here. So we need to eat enough protein. We need to eat enough protein to preserve the muscle, to preserve the bone. We've just talked about the importance of that and how hard it is to maintain as a woman. So A, we need to do the strength training to give the stimulus, but B, we need to eat enough protein to give ourselves the building block to rebuild that muscle, to maintain our bone or preserve our bone. It's obviously also really important to preserve the muscle to avoid injury, and protein is important for so much more. We make our hormones from it. It's important for so many processes in the human body. In terms of our goal, we want to be aiming for about 1.6 grams of protein as a minimum per kilogram of body weight every day. General population, the advice is 0.8 grams. Most women I work with probably aren't even hitting that 0.8. But if you are active, you want to be aiming more towards that 1.6. If you're extremely active, or if you're into perimenopause, where the risk of losing our muscle is even higher, we want to be trying to nudge up to that 2 grams. But again, don't make it such a big target that it feels unachievable and you don't even try. Where are you now? Could you nudge up from that? For most of us, that means we want to be getting in at least 30 grams of protein at each meal. And then we probably need some protein-based snacks, whether that's, real food or whether that's shakes or whatever, to supplement throughout the day. And then we also want to be making sure that we get 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of our training. That can be pre or post. There's increasing evidence to say that maybe we want it pre, but that's generally a bit harder to do. So don't sweat the detail. 30 grams of protein pre or post your training session within 30 minutes. Men get about 2 to 18 hours of a recovery window to rebuild their body. We get 30 to 40 minutes. So we want to try and get that protein in as soon as possible. And especially if you're training again that day, even more important. So again, ask yourself, firstly, do the maths. What do you weigh in kilos? 1.6 or even 1 times that. Are you getting enough protein in? Then secondly, carbohydrate. Carbohydrate's often seen as the sort of devil, something that we need to avoid. That is not true for anybody, but it's certainly not true for you if you're an athlete. And an athlete means anybody who deliberately moves their body towards a goal. So if you are training, if you are running, cycling, swimming, anything, where you're using your body, you need to make sure you're training with carbs. We have enough carbohydrates stored in our body for about 60 to 90 minutes worth of exercise, depending on how high intensity we're working, which means that we need to fuel if we've been fasting, which means overnight. Unless you are getting up and eating carbohydrates throughout the night, you are fasting probably for at least 8 hours overnight. So we need to take on carbohydrates in the morning before we train in the morning. We need to take on carbohydrates if we're doing a session that's over 60 minutes or if it's particularly high intensity, so we're burning through what's in our body. We'd also need to, if we hadn't had carbs, if we had carbs at lunch and then didn't train till 9 in the evening, we probably again want to be topping up our carbohydrate. If it's below that, if you have eaten relatively recently with some carbohydrates in there, then probably you don't need them. But if you find that you're always fatigued, if you find that you're making limited progress, if you keep on getting injured, I'd really recommend trying more carbohydrates and seeing if that makes a difference for you. So again, question for you to ask yourselves, do you underfuel your training in terms of carbohydrates? And do you know why? Is that a mindset thing? Is it just a practical thing? Or is it a mindset thing? If it's a mindset thing, that's something, again, I work so much with my clients on, trying to change our mindset so that our mind, our thoughts are serving us. If it's a practical thing, deal with it. Work out why and can you change it? If we're not fueling our training, we risk being hungry, which often then it's not pleasant, but then it might get lightheaded, so we don't train so well, but also we probably end up eating more in the long run because we come back starving. So why not eat when we're training and get some quality in that help us with our session? We risk higher rates of injury. We risk losing that muscle because if our body doesn't have enough energy on board, it will literally start breaking down our muscle to get energy, digesting, I don't know, the muscle to get the energy from it. We risk making less progress because we've got less energy on board to fuel our training. We're less adapted for racing. If we're going to be racing, we're going to be using carbs then. And if our body isn't used to using carbs, we'll be less adapted. It's going to be harder on our stomach. We end up feeling more sick. And then, as I said, we risk going into this low energy availability or even into reds, which is, we don't want to be there. It's really hard work to reverse it. In contrast, fueling well supports you to train harder, so you have a better quality training session. You recover better, so you get more adaptations, so you get more from your training. the risk, if you're under fueling your training, you're doing all that training, but you're not getting the benefit from it. So fuel well so you get those adaptations, so you get fitter, and ultimately because you feel better, you enjoy it more. I've got so many clients, and we can have a long battle to get there. You know, it's, as I say, it's often very much in our head, so it's really hard work for them to change their mindset around it. But when they do start fueling, they feel so much better and enjoy the training more. In terms of what to eat, so if we're talking mealtime, if you're training in the evening, you know, if you have lunch, you want to get a good quality carbohydrates in there, some vegetables and stuff as well. If we're talking something you eat specifically around training, maybe a banana, maybe some dried fruit, some granola, flapjack, the old favourite on cycle rides. If it's early morning, a lot of us have issues. You know, I'm not saying get up to it 2 hours earlier so you can have your breakfast before you go for your run or whatever, but find something that's easy on your stomach that you can absorb easily. So baby rice is a really good one. Rice pudding is a really good one. I'm obsessed with rice pudding. Bananas again, smoothies, just something that isn't too solid, that sits easy in your stomach, but is got a good source of quality carbohydrates in there. Or not even quality, we're not looking for quality here, we're not looking for nutrition, we're just looking for energy. And particularly talking about energy rather than nutrition, race fuel. So when we get onto our racing, we're doing higher intensity, we need it to be practical so we can use it in a race, and we want something easy to digest while we're working in a race. So then we sort of move on to those sugarier things, which I wouldn't recommend using all the time because there's no nutrition in them, but they serve a purpose. Racing is an entirely whole new thing. Again, we talk lots about that in my membership, and I work on it obviously with my clients. But yeah, don't forget your race fuel. And then just to sort of touch in on mindset, as I say, this is something I work on so much with my clients. You can know all the things you know, but then your mind gets in the way and your thoughts come in, and that makes it so much harder to implement the things that we're talking about. So as we've gone through this presentation, what are your thoughts saying? Are you thinking things like, I'll never be able to get to a 1.6 grams in terms of the protein, or I haven't got the time to do the strength conditioning, or I don't want to do the strength conditioning, I'm worried I'll get injured, or I just haven't got time for this, or I haven't got time for this right now, I'll do it some other time, whatever. Any of those thoughts, be aware that our thoughts are not facts, they're just things, they're opinions, they're voices in our head, but we can challenge them. And if you've had any of those thoughts, chances are, without even consciously realizing it, you've just decided not to act on the things that we've been talking about today. So check in with your thoughts and be prepared to challenge them, be prepared to reframe them, and see if you can find a thought that might serve you better. So yeah, you might never get to 1.6 grams, but let's not leave that thought there. Let's say, where am I now? Could I increase it by 1 gram? Not 0.1 gram. Or I haven't got time to do strength and conditioning. Well, could you do some calf raises while you brush your teeth? Starting to think about the options of what you could do rather than letting our mind just go straight to that default of I can't. So summarizing, number 1, get to know yourself and work with your body. Track your cycle, track those symptoms, and if you're not already, take a rest week, which is either in sync with your symptoms of your menstrual cycle, or if you don't have symptoms or they don't impact you, then every 3 weeks. I'd say if you're perimenopausal, you can go down to or up to every 4 weeks if you're younger than that. But from perimenopause onwards, unless you're doing it in sync with your cycle, which is however long it is, then I'd say every 3 weeks, depending on what your training's like. Number 2, look after your muscle and your bones with strength training. And number 3, fuel your training and your recovery. And that's with that 1.6 or working towards that 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, and your carbs if you haven't eaten or if it's over 60 to 90 minutes. So in terms of all the issues, as I say, that people had sent in of what impacted them, the people that signed up for this week of talks for International Women's Day, hopefully we have covered most of the things on there. Those of you who are here, give me a shout, give me a thumbs up if that's kind of helped to answer some of those issues. If you have questions, please do type them in. I'm going to give you a chance to ask more questions in just a minute, so do be thinking of those questions. But have we covered off most of the things there? As I say, I haven't covered off the time and priorities, but I will come back to that in the Q&A. And these issues are the issues I hear time and time again when I'm working with, particularly with female clients, and I mostly work with female clients. You know, the issues of feeling too tired, lacking energy, getting injured, worried about losing strength as we get older, issues of motivation, issues of time. All these things come up again and again, and there's no magic wand to stop them. But there are things that we can do. there's things we can do which put us back in control and where you can start to make a difference. So often in life, we're trying to make a difference to all the things we can't control. These are things we can control. So find that little element, the change you can make, and start to try making that change. And when you've made one change, then try making another. Don't take on too much in one go, but see where you can start to get those changes, to start to change that balance back so you have better energy, so you feel that you're not always sort of the menstrual cycle driving you, but you're working in sync with it. And this reason that the fact, brilliant, Ella's given a big a strong arm there, thank you, Ella. And it's this fact that, you know, I keep on coming when I'm speaking to women, I keep on hearing these same issues that made me decide that I wanted to launch the membership, which I'm just going to take a few moments to talk to you about now, if that's okay. The membership is a place where I hope that I can help people, women, to address these issues. It's for female triathletes and runners who want to feel better as well as get fitter and faster. So for me, you know, one thing is making sure we get to the finish line and the finish times, but the other is making sure we feel happy, healthy doing it. So I've set up the membership to be able to offer affordable help to people to be able to address some of these issues. So if it's all right, I'm just going to quickly talk you through that, and then we'll come back and we'll go into the Q&A. So as I say, be thinking about any questions. In the membership, you get a monthly masterclass every month covering key issues which I think are kind of fundamental to your training, to your health, helping you to be healthier and happier, as well as I say, get fitter and faster. We have a coaching session. So as I said, you can know all the things, but it's about applying them. So how can we find ways, whether it's working with our mindset, whether it's building habits, whether it's just problem solving around the logistics. So coaching sessions to help address the issues that are stopping us from putting things into action. A monthly Q&A to ask any questions that are coming up. I set you a consolidation challenge each month to build on what we've looked at in the masterclass, so you get to put that into action. We have weekly strength and conditioning classes, so they're on demand. You can play them when you want. There's also a live option as well if you want that. And there's weekly mobility sessions, so just short sort of 10-minute mobility sessions, so we can build in that mobility into our week, into our month, so that we just feel better. Everything's stored in a library, so you can catch up on anything that you miss. There's race-ready resources in there as well, so making sure you're ready for racing. You've got a race day plan that includes nutrition, hydration, mindset, all the things. And there's listening lists, so recognising we don't have time to do loads of reading, but we're often out for runs, turbo sessions, whatever, so load up a podcast with some information to help build on the things we discuss in the sessions. For the last few years, I've run a foundations course, Feel Fit Foundations, which I've had, you know, really great feedback from clients. I'm not running it as a standalone course this year. It's only available inside the membership. We started it last month with training fundamentals. So we looked at how to build up your training so that you're safe, so you're effective, so you're not getting injured or ill, and also how to put together your own training plan. Next week, we're going into more detail than we have today on training as a woman, but same sort of things as we've been covering today. The next month, we're looking at mindset. So what I was beginning to talk about there, how we can work on our thoughts so that we have thoughts that serve us, that help us towards our goals. Then we'll be looking at nutrition in a load more detail. And then we'll be looking at recovery, energy, rest in a lot more detail. So that's all the things we've got coming up, and there's more coming up the rest of the year. But that's that foundations course, which, as I say, is only available in the membership this year. Here's just a few testimonials from people that did the course last year. So Vic said she'd recommend the course to anybody interested in improving their fitness. She learnt so much, even though she'd been running for 30 years. She says, Lucy's so knowledgeable and is passionate about passing that knowledge on. She gives you all the tools you need to achieve your goals. And she goes on to say that the mindset section of the course has been invaluable to her. And through that mindset work, she transformed her life significantly in just a few weeks. Katie, when Katie started the course, her diet was not very good at all. She had bad sort of IBS type symptoms, and so she basically lived off pasta parcels because she was scared to eat anything else. Through the course, she started changing her diet, and she said within a month, she noticed a huge difference. She said, I can't believe how much it's changed my mental and physical well-being. I haven't been ill since I started doing it. I can't recommend it enough. So that's just 2 quotes from people who did the course last year. So for the membership, It's just £25 each month, and for that £25 you get the coaching session, you get the masterclass, you get the Q&A, you get the consolidation session challenge, you get the weekly strength and conditioning sessions, you get the weekly mobility sessions, you get everything stored in the library so you can watch it when you want, including those race ready resources. For you watching tonight though, I've got a special offer. So if you sign up by tonight, you will get your first month in the membership for just £10. £10 for how many is in a month? 4 or 5 strength and conditioning classes, I say, is bloody good value anyway. But you're getting all those other things as well. So I'd say give it a go. You can always cancel if you don't like it. So that's the link there to sign up, or flash your phone if you're not on your phone right now at that QR code, and then use that code IWD25A to get that first month for £10. In addition, the first 3 people to sign up today will also get a free one-to-one coaching call with me, which I'll give you separate details to book in. There's also a welcome session on Monday, this Monday just coming at 6 p.m. Don't worry if you can't make it, we can chat anytime, but a welcome session for those of you who are new to the membership to kind of make sure you know where everything is, answer any questions that you've got. And anybody who signs up at the moment is still getting founder status. So I launched the membership in January, and anybody who signs up is getting founder status, which means you will only pay that £25 a month for as long as the membership lasts. So if I develop it, I hope to develop it in the future. If the prices go up, if Trump blows up the world and prices go up, then you will still only be paying that £25 a month for the life of the membership. So sign up now to get that deal. If you forget the link, then you can find it on my website, feelfitwithlucy.co.uk/membership, or you can find it in the How I Can Help section. In terms of just questions that people might ask, so the calls are mostly lunchtime or evening, alternating. So if you can't make one month, hopefully you'll be able to make it the next week or the next month. Everything's recorded though, so you can watch it any time that you want. You can always cancel if you don't like it. So, you spent your £25, but you're not committed beyond that. It doesn't include a training plan. You get discounts on my standalone plans. And as I said, last month we did a session on writing or adapting your own plan. So you've got those tools and resources to be able to work on your own plan. You could bring your plan to a coaching session and we can work on it there. If you're interested in the strength and conditioning, you don't need any special kit at all to get started, just some space. But as I say, I do recommend using weights. So if you're not using weights in the gym, then I'd recommend having some weights at home, but don't make that a barrier to getting started. Come along. And then if you find that it works for you, it's something you want to build in, then look at getting those weights. The sessions, it's a 60-minute session, but you don't have to do it as a 60-minute session. Loads of people find it works really effectively to do the first half of the session as part of an extended warm-up before they run, and then they get loads more out of their running as well. So you can split the sessions up. If you're saying, I haven't got time, then remember, you don't have to watch everything, you don't have to do everything. Just choose the sessions that work, that have got the most value for you. When I send out the recordings, I put the timestamps on there so you can always find the bits that you want to fast forward to. But I'd always also say, if you haven't got time, then you really need to make sure you're getting the most out of every moment. And my intention with the membership is it's giving you that quality. So you're getting better quality training. So the time you have is spent better. You get more impact from that training. The nutrition means you're getting more impact from that training. The coaching is helping to address anything that's holding you back. So it should, I'm not going to say, it's cheesy to say saves you time, but effectively it should save you time or get more for the time that you put in the long run. And yes, you could wait a few months and sign up, but I won't be running an offer. I don't even know if I'll be taking new entries in a few months. But also, if you try to just wait a few months and then watch all of that foundations course in one, you will be overloaded. You might have the information, but you won't make the change. That's why I deliberately run the course with one issue per month, so you get time to work on that one issue, make the changes, and only once you've made that changes do we introduce another thing to be looking at. I've probably overloaded you with things today, but I wanted to make sure you got enough in this session to have something to take away. And as Nat's a really busy person. She gets up at 5 every morning to fit in everything around her life. But Nat says the way that I cover the topics makes it perfect to fit in around a busy life and shows you how to apply these foundations to your everyday life. So if Nat can fit it in, as I say, really busy person, then I think most people can. And just to say on the impact of coaching, so Izzy was somebody who had big anxiety about a lot of things in life, but she was getting really worried about upcoming races last year. I worked with her, coaching her on that mindset around anxiety, and she said it made such a difference in how she had enjoyed the build-up and the race itself. So there it is again. There's that link. There's that QR code. Zap that to get that offer, make sure you sign up by tonight to get your first month for just £10. And there's that code IWD25A. And if you get in quick, then hopefully you will get the one-to-one call as well. This is obviously going out to the people who've signed up as well. So it'll be going out tonight. So if you're watching this on replay, still make sure you're getting in there quick. So the challenge I said I would issue to you, in my experience, when I sort of suggest people work on their protein, they go, yep, that sounds like a good thing. I know I need to do that. And it gets put on the over there pile. There's something I will do when I have time. Don't turn it into a bigger thing than it needs to be. Think about looking now to see what your target is, work out that target, and then choose when you're going to act on it. I'd say start tomorrow. If you really can't do it tomorrow, choose when, hopefully this week. And all you need to do is when you have breakfast tomorrow or whenever, look at the packet of whatever you're eating, look on the back, how much protein does it have it per 100 grams, weigh it so you can work out what your portion is, and then you know, are you hitting that 30 grams? Do the same at lunch, do the same at dinner. I am not saying to weigh your food every day. I'm not a fan of doing that at all. I'm saying to do it once or twice with a few typical meals, because most of us eat the same sort of things. You don't have to weigh everything. Only the things that you know have got protein in it. So, you know, typical breakfast or a breakfast you might have to try and increase your protein, some yogurt, some blueberries and some nuts. You don't need to weigh the blueberries because they ain't got no protein in. But the nuts, the seeds, the yogurt, see what portion size you've got, how much protein, and then just see how short you are of that 30 grams per meal and think what's something simple you could add in to increase it. You're not aiming for perfection. You're just aiming to be a little bit better in terms of that protein intake than you are now. So over to you guys. Any questions for me? If you'd rather unmute, feel free to unmute if that's easier, if you've got any questions to ask. I'll go on to one. As I said, lots of people, when they were signing up for the session, said the time juggling was an issue. So I'll go and cover that. But please do, those of you here, type in or shout if you want to unmute and ask. So in terms of this issue, that particularly as women we have, because we've got caring responsibilities, kids, older parents. I mean, men have those responsibilities as well, but it does seem that women have more of them. But life, work, everything else that we're trying to juggle. So ask yourself, is it that you don't have enough time? Do you literally not have enough time? And if you don't have enough time, do those goals need to change? Do you need to think about doing, say you're training for a marathon, maybe a half marathon would be more appropriate because you can get the quality in there and you just don't have the time to get the quality for a full marathon? Or is it your expectations? You could still do the marathon, but maybe you can't chase that PB, or you can't expect to beat blah, 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 who hasn't got kids and hasn't got all the other sort of things you've got going on in your life. Or even if they have, you know, we never know what's going on in other people's lives. We like to compare ourselves, but we don't have the full information to make a fair comparison. Or is it that we need to change or put in boundaries? If you know, everybody else is taking up more of our time than we give ourselves, do we need to start putting in some boundaries that can feel so hard to do, but can make such a difference in terms of our quality of life and the quality of life we can give back to other people then? Do we need to think about quality over quantity, particularly when I'm working with women, however much we don't want to admit it, or maybe we do, but often we're exercising to burn calories. And if we're trying to improve our training, maybe we want to be thinking about the quality rather than just the constant calorie burning. And do we need to ditch the perfectionism? Do we need to get a little bit better at saying good enough is good enough? Or is it that we're not making time? We do have the time, but we're not making the time. Do we need to get better at planning? Do we need to get better at building habits that will allow us to get our training in? Do we need to change our expectations around what we can fit into a certain amount of time? Or do we need to get better at learning from failures? Failures are always seen as a really negative word, but if things don't work, rather than going, I just need to try harder, let's try different. Let's see why it didn't work and see what we can do differently next time that's going to make it easier for us. So those are a quick few thoughts in terms of how we can get more time or use our time differently. Any other questions? Please do unmute if you've got any questions and you would like to ask them. I'll give it a minute longer for you to type in anything, but otherwise, thank you very much for joining me tonight, whether you are watching on replay or whether you are here live. If you've got any questions about the membership or one-to-one coaching, then please do give me a shout. If there's questions that I haven't answered in terms of the issues of training as a woman or whatever that I haven't covered, then drop me a message again and I'll do my best to answer it. With that, I will probably sign off then. I will say very happy International Women's Day. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Roxanne. I will say happy International Women's Day. I hope you have a lovely evening. I hope you have a lovely International Women's Day this weekend if you're doing something to celebrate it or just being a woman in your strongest, best self. And do think about putting into action some of the things we've talked about tonight, but don't overdo it. Don't try and do everything. Choose one thing, choose to work on that. And once you've got that built in, then think about trying to build in something else. So don't overload yourself. You don't have to achieve everything tomorrow. Just keep taking those little steps forwards. And let me know how you get on. I would love to hear if anything we talked about tonight you managed to put into action and what difference it makes for you. So brilliant. Have a good evening, everybody. Take care and see you soon.